Hi there, Kelly here from Body Fit Solutions. So what I wanted to go through is ways that we can do a classical exercise in the Pilates repertoire and how we can maybe make it more functional. And what I would encourage you to do is to feel both versions. Maybe it's a way that you're teaching or you're doing it now. And I'm going to show you some ways that you might be able to do it a slightly different way and maybe feel more connected to your center and feel more functional in how that exercise can then help us with day-to-day life. So one exercise that was particularly hard for me when I first started out was the Swan. And what I found that I was really working into my low back a lot and not really working into my upper back, which is where we really want to encourage more movement, is through the upper back. The low back is really meant to be a place of stability. And what you often find with the classical Swan is that most people kind of hinge or move primarily from the low back area. So the traditional way of doing the Swan is with the legs wide and slightly laterally rotated, and then we tend to come up into kind of these kind of postures. They're also done in yoga, but what I found is, especially with my clients and myself, is when the legs are laterally rotated, this creates a little bit of compression through the sacral area, and it actually encourages us to go into a hyperextension through the low back. And when we think about it logically, the legs don't actually walk around like this. In our day-to-day life, if we were to extend and look up at, let's say, a high skyscraper or something like that, we wouldn't be doing it with our legs turned out. We'd be doing it with our legs really rooted into the ground in a nice parallel position. So I tend to teach the Swan more parallel, and some methods do teach this, but our classical kind of Joseph Pilates Swan is tend to be done in a turned out position. So we're going to have our legs really parallel, and notice how I walk my legs down the mat and give a little bit of space through the hip. Now if you are someone that is primarily tight in the front of your thighs, in the front of your hips, you might want to follow some of our myofascial release exercises for releasing tension there, because if ultimately you're tight through there, you're probably not going to go into an efficient Swan. The other thing I want you to consider is relaxing the front of your thighs and your knees and getting a feeling of length through the sacrum. So we're going to feel like the front of the pelvis, the pubic bone, and the crease of the leg is actually on the mat. Now it doesn't really matter where your hand positions are. There's a few hand positions, and I really value having the hands here in front for my shoulder girdle, and I'm just going to gently come up into just where I can feel the upper back movement really beautifully and fluidly, but I'm not forcing it into my low back. So one thing I've got to cue is a little bit of my navel lifting. I'm not trying to pull and squeeze and brace, but I'm just trying to retract the belly as my upper back lengthens. So I create space going forward and up. The other way you can do it is with the hands in a W position, and then there's a sense almost of pulling the floor back, maybe of pushing the floor forward. Now this doesn't always serve me. I feel like this goes into my low back, but see what feels better for you and have the sense that the legs are almost going down the mat. Now as I did that, my body released a little bit more. So I had the energy of moving my upper body and my lower body away from one another. So creating traction. Another way that you can do it is with the arms in kind of more of a grasshopper position, I call it. So the hands are by the chest, the elbows are up. And I always feel a sense of lightness through the arms as my body's going forward and up. We want to create space and length in the low back so that the upper back can move. So this serves me to a certain point, and then I can feel that hyperextension of my low back. So what I tend to do is to just feel that first. Let the body go into just that upper back extension. And then when I find my limiting zone, I want to look over one shoulder. Now rotation and extension is very functional. So we go up and over, looking over the shoulder. And there's a sense still that the legs are reaching down the mat, not in an aggressive way, but in a traction way. And so I just slowly start to gaze my eyes around. What sometimes is helpful is to allow the leg on that side to come up, and you'll notice that your body actually wants to come up a little bit higher when you do that. So if you are really limited in extension, try this little crawling pattern. You can have the hands wherever you like for this, but it's the idea that as you Go from a baby lying on the floor up into crawling. These are the kind of patterns that we develop. And then if you come back then to your more favorite position for the hands, and we start going forward, even me just doing a few rotations, I'm not exaggerating, my body just went up a little bit more. My legs are still parallel, I'm still lifting my navel, and then opening my chest. And it feels that I'm not compressing into my low back. It feels like I'm lengthening the entirety of my spine and feeling the elastic capacity of the front of the body. And you can just do a few of those. So see how that feels. Give me a comment below on how you enjoyed that variation of the swan. Maybe you've done that before. Maybe test it with your clients if you are an instructor and see what they feel. Having the legs more parallel, playing with rotation before we go up into the full swan. So let's break out of maybe the classical repertoire and let's come to the new age way of moving, where we move in reciprocals. Okay, we move unilaterally and we move really parallel. We don't move in this really spiraled rotation, especially when we're talking about walking and running. So I look forward to your comments. If you want to see more videos on this, check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and all the notifications will come to you. Many thanks.